What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the attic. In today's video, we're going to risk a large portion of the bankroll on UFC 320. This event has a ton of wide lines, and the models don't favor too many underdogs. If you're new here, you might not be aware. The current betting system requires that I bet on all of the fighters that the prediction models expect to win. So, there's no hiding from some very expensive bets. I'm looking forward to covering all of these upcoming fights, but first, we need to quickly recap last week's action. After placing no wagers just 2 weeks ago, last weekend was jam-packed. It started off on Friday with PFL Europe 3. On that card, I had a couple of bets not make it to the cage, so those were canceled. But the models were correct on 2 of 3 predictions for a profit of 1 unit. The following morning, we had more PFL, this time for PFL MENA 3. Another canceled fight left us with a 2-2 record on the card and no change to the bankroll. Saturday just kept the fights coming, this time with LFA 218. This was the only card on the entire weekend where I didn't have a bet canceled before fight night. It was also the most profitable of the weekend, turning a 2.05 unit profit with perfect predictions. The last card of the weekend was UFC Fight Night Perth. I don't know what was going on this past week, but this card also suffered from a lot of last-minute cancellations. I had 2 bets that were refunded since Monday, and several other fights fell out before that. At the end of the card, the models had correctly predicted 7 of 11 fights for a small loss of 0.46 units. It could have been better, but one ref thinks he can just take back his decision to end a fight. I'm not saying that Matthews should have won, but the fight was officially stopped. It should have at least been a no contest. I'm still a little sour about that, but let's move on. Finally, I finished off Saturday night by accepting the weekly bonus of 0.32 units. In total this week, the models increased the bankroll by 2.91 units. Now that we're all caught up, let's see how the prediction models risked more than 60% of my bankroll on the upcoming UFC 320. We'll be starting off the night at women's flyweight for a bout between Brogan Walker and Veronica Hardy. Brogan is the older fighter by 7 years, which would normally affect the models quite a bit, but in WMMA, they find much less value in age. Instead, we should be focusing our attention toward finishing rate, where Hardy is over 30%, while Walker is under 15%. This is what seems to matter to the models. So far, we have been quite successful at predicting favorites to win in this division, and Hardy certainly fits into that category. All 3 models like Veronica Hardy, with 2 of them fairly confident. She is a minus 650 favorite at the books, so I have placed a 9.73 unit wager on her to win. Here's a quick betting strategy guide for those of you who are new. I run 3 prediction models against every upcoming fight, and it is a majority rules system. I will always be betting on the fighter that has 2 models over 50%. If only 2 agree, then I will use a betting strategy that I call 1+, which has me betting any plus money fighter for 1 unit and any favorite for enough to return 1 unit. If the third model also agrees on who will win, then I scale all of that up to 1.5 units, which you can see here. All 3 models agree that Hardy should win the fight, so I have bet the bare minimum that will return 1.5 units if she wins. Finally, 1 unit is always 1% of my bankroll. This is calculated on Sunday after all of the weekend's bets have been cashed. Hopefully, we all know what's going on now. Let's move on to the second fight of the night between Ramiz Brahimaj and Austin Vanderford at welterweight. Right off the bat, I'm already confused about where I've laid this bet. Fight results make up a massive part of the model's decisions, yet somehow we're seeing Ramiz favored. They're both within a very normal age range for this division, and method of victory doesn't seem to have enough pull to move the lines this far. Brahimaj has only been stopped once in his career, and that was when Max Griffin exploded his ear, so I'd hardly call that a real KO. It looks like Austin either wins by decision or Ramiz is going to get a stoppage. The models are not super convinced, but they are leaning toward the underdog here. I picked up Ramiz Brahimaj at plus 250 for 1 unit. Sticking around at 170, we'll see Punahele Soriano fighting Nikolai Veretinnikov. These two look damn near copy and paste, with only a few extra years of experience for Veretinnikov. Despite having more total fights and a longer career, Nikolai only has 3 bouts in the UFC compared to 9 for Soriano. They've both won 3 of their last 5 fights, with Punahele winning his last 2 and Nikolai on just a 1-fight winning streak. The models unanimously agree that Punahele Soriano will win this fight, so I've placed a 3.52 unit wager on him as a minus 235 favorite. Next up will be a 135-pound bout between Patchy Mix and Jacob Wicklax. Patchy came into the UFC with a ton of hype behind him and proceeded to stand around like a punching bag for 15 whole minutes. Before that, he was on a 7-fight run that ended with 2 defenses of the Bellator bantamweight title. Jacob is currently on a 7-fight unbeaten streak of his own and will be giving up the KSW bantamweight belt to make his UFC debut. Both of these men finish a lot of their fights by submission, but Wicklax has only stopped 1 opponent in his last 5 wins, where Patchy has 2 subs and a KO. Even with the recent loss, Patchy is still a minus 250 favorite at the books. The models don't have the same level of confidence, but 2 of 3 still see him bringing home the win. I've placed a 2.5 unit wager on Patchy Mix. The last of only 2 women's fights on this card will be a bantamweight matchup between Yana Santos and Macy Chiasson. Look at that height and reach difference. Macy is 5 inches taller and also has a 3.5-inch reach advantage. Neither of these ladies has a particularly good-looking record. Santos has lost a third of her fights, and Macy isn't much better with only a 70% win rate. The models have a history of predicting these ladies' fights incorrectly, but with only 1 fight apiece, we don't have a lot of data to work with. I'll be sticking to the strategy and following the models. 2 of 3 expect a Macy Chiasson win, so I placed a 1.8 unit wager on her as a minus 180 favorite. Moving on to featherweight, where Ju Sang Yu will fight Daniel Santos. Yu is still undefeated at 9-0, but he does have a single fight in the UFC and has no fights in any other major promotion. Santos lost his UFC debut in April of 2022 and has since put together 3 straight wins. His record looks good, but you have to try to ignore the 5 times that Daniel has withdrawn from bouts since signing to the UFC. I really hope these fighters make it to the cage this weekend. If they do, then I'll have a 1.5 unit wager on Ju Sang Yu as a plus 105 underdog. Back down at bantamweight, we've got another fight. This one sees Farid Basharat facing off against Chris Gutierrez. Just look at that chart. There really isn't any question what's going on here. Age and fight results are absolutely the driving factors for the models. Basharat is undefeated at 13-0 and will be the younger fighter by 6 years. Chris has a substantial amount more experience, but these models could hardly care less. All expectations seem to be that Basharat will get it done, and I'd venture to guess that it goes to the judges. I've risked 6.74 units on Farid Basharat as a minus 450 favorite. We're just now finally getting into the heavier weight classes with our first of 3 middleweight bouts. Let's start them off with Edmen Shahbazyan versus Andre Muniz. Edmen has had a very up and down run in the UFC. His current promotional record is 8-5, but at one time he had lost 3 in a row. At some point he changed camps, which might just have turned his career around. Muniz is 6-3 in the UFC and is currently on a bit of a slide. He's been finished in 3 of his last 4 outings and hasn't been very active, with only 1 fight since the end of 2023. All 3 models like Edmund Shabazian in this matchup, so I picked him up as a -275 favorite for 4.12 units. We will be sticking around at middleweight to close out the prelims. This one, a battle between 2 finishers, Atiba Gutierrez and Ozzy Diaz. Atiba has a single split decision loss on his record, which came in only his 2nd pro fight. Since then, he has stopped all 7 of his opponents, with only 1 of them making it out of the first round. Ozzy has only heard scorecards read in a single bout, that one being his last time out. Of the rest of his fights, 8 have ended in the first round. It doesn't take a genius to see that Diaz's stoppage losses could likely be his downfall. The models are all quite confident in Gutierrez, so that's where I'll lay my bet. Unfortunately, the bettors are also quite confident, so he is a very large favorite at -950. This wager on Atiba Gutierrez has cost me 14.23 units. For some reason, the UFC decided to slap all of the middleweight fights together on this card, so we'll be kicking off the main card with a bout between Joe Pyfer and Abus Magomedov. Again, we have 2 fighters with very similar spreads on their records. Both win most of their fights by KO, but still have enough subs to show that they can handle the ground game. They each have a perfectly even spread of losses, but those also make up just 18% of their total fights. Abus does have twice as many professional fights, but they will both be making their 7th walk to the octagon. The models don't attribute enough importance to the experience of Abus, so I've placed a 3.52 unit wager on Joe Pyfer as a -235 favorite. The second pay-per-view fight will take place at featherweight, with Youssef Zalal fighting Josh Emmett. Please direct your attention to the fighter stats up top, where you will see that Zalal is 11 years younger, 4 inches taller, and has 2 inches in reach. Age is the only one of these that makes a big difference to the models, but they do all count. The largest contributor is certainly fight results, but there just isn't a big difference between 77 and a 79% win rate. Where we do see a big difference is Josh has lost 3 of his last 4, while Youssef is on a 7-fight win streak with 6 finishes. Zalal is a moderate favorite at the books, but the models are far less convinced. Josh might be a good underdog play here, but y'all know the rules. 2 models favor Youssef Zalal, so I placed a 4.54 unit wager on him as a -455 favorite. The feature bout on this card takes place at light heavyweight when Yuri Prochazka steps into the cage against Khalil Roundtree Jr. A lot of stoppage wins, a lot of stoppage losses, and plenty of fight bonuses on their records. These 2 expect to put on exciting fights, but it's hard to guess which side of a brutal KO either one of them might end up on. Khalil was recently stopped by Poatan, while Yuri has suffered the same fate twice in the last 2 years. All 3 models like Prochazka in this fight, one of them very strongly. The book odds are much closer, with Yuri only a -180 favorite. In my opinion, this fight could go either way, but I have followed the models as always. Yuri Prochazka as a -180 favorite for 2.7 units. We've made it to the co-main event of UFC 320, where Merab Dvalishvili will take on Corey Sandhagen for the bantamweight title. Merab has successfully defended the belt twice now and even earned post-fight bonuses for each of those wins. Corey won his last fight in May, also earning a performance bonus. Unfortunately, in recent years, these 2 have primarily been decision fighters, with 11 of their 15 most recent fights being left in the hands of the judges. Other than age, which is very similar between the 2, the models care most about fight results. Merab's win record is a bit better, which seems to be the difference maker here. The books have Merab Dvalishvili as a -355 favorite and all three models agree, if only by a small margin. A bet on him cost me 5.32 units to return 1.5 units with a win. Finally, we're at the main event rematch between Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev for the light heavyweight title. In March, Ank extended his unbeaten streak to 14 when he won a unanimous decision over Alex to earn the belt. Before this loss, Alex was on a 5-fight win streak with 3 consecutive title defenses, but there wasn't a grappler in sight. These models don't put much weight on age, but there is a 5-year gap here, and Pereira is nearing 40. The big feature here is certainly fight results, and it clearly favors Magomed with only a single loss from 2018. Honestly, I'm a bit surprised that the odds aren't wider here. At the books, Magomed Ankalaev is a -260 favorite, and all three models agree. I've placed a 3.89 unit wager on him to win the fight. That's all the fights on this card, so let's have a quick look at our totals. The models were able to generate predictions for all 14 fights on this card. Of those, they favored 12 favorites, with all three models agreeing on 9 of them. The final 2 were underdogs, with only a single confident prediction at +105 odds. My total risk on this card is 65.12% of the bankroll, with a potential profit of 20.55 units. I'm currently running numbers for PFL and One Championship, which are also coming up this weekend. As you can see in the intro, the smaller promotions do boost the bankroll quite significantly, so click the link in the description to get those predictions for free on Patreon. Also, check out my new video on who Conor McGregor could actually beat if he fights on the UFC White House card. As always, thanks for watching and good luck on all of your bets this weekend.